In August 2010, I briefly occupied a small corner of the culture wars, and I felt like a fish in a fishbowl. Everybody was staring at a distorted image of me, and all I could do was blink and blow bubbles. I teach at Brooklyn College, where the undergraduate writing program has, for several years, assigned a common reading to all freshmen. This year, the program selected my book, How Does It Feel to Be a Problem? Being Young and Arab in America, in which I tell the stories of 7 Arab American men and women, all in their 20s and living in Brooklyn, coping in a post-9/11 world. Everything was fine until about a week before classes began. That is when the chair of my department called me to report that the college had received complaints about the selection. I hoped the noise would fade, but within days, tabloid news media had grabbed the issue from the right-wing blogosphere. I was ready to hide behind a piece of coral. Both the New York Times and the New Yorker pointed out that the controversy was driven almost entirely by off-campus conservatives, but it didn't matter. Now I, not those manufacturing the storm, had become the controversial one. And Brooklyn College was pushing an anti-American, pro-Islam book, at least according to rightwingnews.com. I might have found the fracas amusing were it not unpleasant to be called all kinds of names in public. I certainly didn't recognize my book or myself in the descriptions being tossed out. I mean, the only radical organization I belong to is the Park Slope Food Co-op. From which I must confess, I've been suspended several times. So have some of you. Opposition to my book seems more symptomatic of our moment than produced by its contents. The Texas State Board of Education recently voted to limit references to Islam in their high school textbooks. Understanding this topsy-turvy world where assailants driven by ideology paint their targets as the ideological ones also explains the rhetoric around Park 51, the so-called Ground Zero Mosque. Not at Ground Zero and not a mosque. As soon as Muslims are on the cusp of entering the mainstream fully, we're hit with a wave of opposition attempting to render us or our work invisible. Never mind that we are, by all reasonable accounts, downright moderates on the political spectrum. The trick is simply to attach the word radical in front of a Muslim name, and like a magician, making the actual person disappear in a cloud of suspicion. At a time when The Economist reports that 55% of Americans hold unfavorable views of Islam, and Time found that nearly 1/3 of Americans say Muslims should not be permitted to run for president, too late. I would like to think that the opposition to our work illustrates the need for it even more profoundly. Ideology blinds people to the point where they won't even admit the experiences of others. To be invisible means to be twisted beyond recognition, to have others speak for you, or simply to not be seen. When our opponents approach us, they see only our surroundings, themselves, or figments of their imagination. Indeed, anything except us. We must ask questions about the direction American society has been taking since the inauguration of the war on terror. A war that could possibly never end, and that can also be self-justifying. It has created its own war on terror culture, one that exploits people's fears and traffics liberally in stereotypes of others. War on terror culture has meant that we are now regularly seen as dangerous outsiders, that our daily actions are constantly viewed with suspicion, that our complex history in this country are neglected or occluded, and that our very presence and our houses of worship have become issues of local, regional, and national politics. This is a culture that too often rationalizes away unnecessary killing while supporting authoritarian-leaning practices. It thrives on secrecy and militarism. War on terror culture is obsessed with exploiting fear and with shaping the realms of politics, and it feeds on the dubious and paranoid logic of scapegoating others. Or maybe there's another source of all the animus against me. A while back, I published a short essay in the New York Times Magazine describing my experiences as an Arab extra on the set of Sex and the City 2. I was mildly critical of the movie for the way it used the Middle East, yet again as an exotic stage for American pop culture fantasies. Maybe that set some people off. After all, the show has a lot of hardcore fans.